Oh, I should use the microphone. I think we're doing it. Yes. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. We're using microphones now here at the Gordon Snellgrove Gallery Talks because we're trying to get good recordings of everything. So, in fact, I'm going to ask Ernst to use the lapel mic. And then for questions and discussions, I know it's a pain, but we'll hand the mic around so that we can get good recordings of everything. As you know, my name is Marcus Miller. I'm the director here at the Gordon Snellgrove Gallery. I just wanted some housekeeping. Next week, we're having another artist talk by a recent graduate from the department, Rain Poisson. She graduated in 2014, and she is now doing an internship at the Western Development Museum and is part of the program that she's doing in conservation at Fleming College in Ontario. So she's going to talk about archival materials, so that might be interesting. And that's next Thursday at 1 o'clock. I'm really happy to present Ernst here, who's widely respected here in Canada and in Europe for the criticality he brings to his artistic practice and for all the research that he does that his work is based on. His work includes photography, installation, video, public art, and memorials. And I think that his work really addresses trauma, if I can say that, geopolitical and ecological issues. So he just, as many of you know, just completed a special workshop in pinhole photography, something that I think went very, very well. And I thank Barb Reimer here for really facilitating that and helping to make that work. It was really a great opportunity, I think, for many people in the department because it was generously supported by the ICCC, the Interdisciplinary Center for Culture and Creativity. So they funded this thing, and we had lots of materials to work with, and it was really a great opportunity. I'll just end by speculating on the trajectory of Ernst's work, and he can completely disagree with me or bounce off of it. But what I've noticed from getting to know Ernst over the last few years, and I consider him to be a real friend of mine now, is that his work sort of started out, the trajectory started out with a focus on trauma, a word that I just used here, and it was personal and political trauma through installations, memorials, public art, the Den Blick, Heinrichten installation that you were showing me the other night. Was that a graduating exhibition of yours? A very, very powerful installation. And Den Blick, Heinrichten, I see that... oh, excuse me. My German is awful. And I apologize especially to you, but to everybody here, means focusing the gaze on executions by the rifle squad, yes? And then after that work, and I'm missing lots of gaps, but the work that I publicized in the call for his pinhole workshop was using pinhole photography itself, and we put a picture up from this series of works that he did in Hong Kong, and it shows this intense urban landscape without any traffic, without any pedestrians, without anything. And that's, of course, because of the extremely long exposures that are required by pinhole photography. And that, in fact, was his intention, is to sort of slow down the city and, in fact, get rid of all of that busyness. The word he used was velocity. But something very interesting, I think, came out of that, and something that Ernst has told me about before, that the long exposures actually required him to kind of stand there for long periods of time. And he was saying that, well, there were security cameras around, and people became suspicious of, like, what is this guy doing just in one place? Like, it didn't seem like he was doing anything. And so he aroused suspicion. And I think that might have led on to subsequent works that had to do with interrogating the nature of public space And so there was a whole series of work that came out of that. And then more recently, and of course on this extended trip that he's made to Canada, including Alberta, the U of A symposium there, he's been exploring the impacts and myriad environmental and cultural implications, the traumas, I would say, again, of on the environment and on cultures that they're brought about by the oil industry. So I give you Ernst Logar.
Does it work? This microphone? I think you have to... Here. It's work all over. Yeah, it works. Markus, thank you very much for the introduction. I will, in this presentation, I will focus on my current work. So it will explain my way of working and will focus on these current projects about oil. Yeah? So that's why my presentation has the title Reflecting Oil. So I just will start with to explain my way of working. So I begin with this. So Markus was already mentioning my work, which is related to my family history and trauma. So I begin with my talk. So I will begin with my work, non-public spaces, as an example of my process. Then I will talk about my project Invisible Oil, which engages the natural resource of petroleum and represents a central facet of my artistic work. After that, I will turn to my project Oil and Water, which deals with the tar sands industry in Canada. As the conclusion of my talk, I will talk about an art-based research project that I'm currently planning in cooperation with the University of Applied Arts Vienna, the Montan-Universität Leoben, it's a university of mining in Austria, and the University of Alberta, with the target start date of 2018. Non-public spaces and invisible oil are detective works, so to speak, intent to reveal forces and elements that are normally invisible or hidden from us. A lot of my artistic works are investigative as well, but focus on questions related to recent Austrian history, specifically the Austrian resistance to national socialism. This commemorative project included an intensive research process on my own family history and the history of the Slovenian minority in the Austrian province of Carinthia. This is my home province, and it's close to the Slovenian and Italian border. It's in the south of Austria. In 2008, I presented the exhibition series The End of Remembering Carinthian Partisans, which tackled the resistance of Carinthian Slovenes during the Second World War, and my identity as it is tied up in it. The first location of this exhibition series was a video installation in the light well of Palais Epstein at the Austrian Parliament. So here you see I did a video installation with interviews of women and men who were fighting as partisans or supporting the partisan movement. Markus mentioned the work Den Blick hinrichten. I don't present this here, but there is a website, Den Blick hinrichten, yeah, with a short English description. So this work was my graduate work was an installation. It was an execution space. Anyway, I don't show an image about this work in my presentation. So this was the video installation. The aim of this exhibition was to raise awareness of the fate and the contributions of Carinthian Slovenes. These women and men participated in the overthrow of the National Socialist regime, and their contributions have not been adequately recognized in Austria until today. I pointed out this gap in contemporary Austrian history in my exhibition series and tried to trigger a public debate on this issue. The video installation was shown in multiple locations connected to the history of the resistance in Austria between 2008 and 2012. So my intention was to show it not in a gallery, because in my opinion it has to address a wider audience, and I also showed it in spaces which are related to the history of the Carinthian partisans. So a former execution space in the court in Vienna. So there is a commemorate space there where the National Socialists executed people, and I showed it in other sites. So a lot of in Carinthia, so the places where this history happened. So let me now turn to non-public spaces. The origins of this project go back to 1998. My interest at the time was in exploring spaces that govern our lives. That is to say, our everyday lives and how they are configured aesthetically. The spaces I choose aren't typically accessible to the average citizen. Spaces marked with some kind of social, economic, political, or religious significance. I began in the Austrian capital, home to so many very touristy landmarks, and quite naturally I gravitated to a morgue in the Viennese coroner's office. Other spaces soon followed. So this was one of my first non-public spaces. It's very, very exciting. Now, this is a vault of the Austrian Federal Reserve Bank. What appeals to me is in this work is the crossing of boundaries. In other words, the penetration into protected spaces and the direct confrontation with the governing institutions that ensure these places remain unseen. I gained entry in these zones in my capacity as an artist by navigating complex bureaucratic processes that at the beginning of the project I didn't document. Later on I archived these negotiations and in doing so I realized that they were of equal significance to me as the photos I snapped up on my arrival. This is art storage is the art storage of the Centre Pompidou in Paris. So I continue with the process. For instance, I try to record phone conversations and wherever possible make video recordings of the various stages. The preliminary research, the permission process, and my actual entry into each space. The trove of written correspondence, emails, faxes, letters, that necessarily emerges from the permission process is an important part of the exhibition. So this is the only photo I took in New York. This is the entrance area of the Federal Reserve Bank. This was in 2002 after 9/11. So it was like my work was the telephone conversations were quite strange because, you know, I tried to get access to the water reservoir of New York City. So they were like, because it was a very sensitive issue. The exhibitions also included the images of these sites, both small or large-scale photographs. In terms of pictorial composition, the aim of these pictures is to accentuate the three-dimensional nature of these sites. In addition to the correspondence and the photos, I also presented selected audio and video documentary material. So this was in 2005. It was at the 7th of July. There were a terrorist attack in the underground in London. So at this time, I was in London for residency, and I tried. I had to after the attacks. I had to change my concept because it was like to do this at this time was. Anyway, I don't explain. I was also stopped by the police taking video in the underground during the attacks, so that wasn't funny at all. Mm-hmm. So then I focused on media spaces. So because the media was that present, after the attack, so I started to apply to get access to different media spaces. And this is the television studio of BBC London. This is interesting space. This is the conference room of the in the Vatican of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints. So this is the space where they decide who is becoming holy. So I took a photo of a room of an office where they determine our universal time. So a scientist is there. He's calculating his. There are, I think, 7 atomic clocks worldwide. They are very precise, and he has to compare these times, and then every year or 2 years they will introduce the leap second, is because the atomic time is more accurate than the Earth rotation. So then they have, from time to time, they have to synchronize the time to the Earth rotation. So it was interesting to read about space where somebody is somehow making our time. Yeah? And it's all about like power and how we are. So this is also about power. Yeah, sure. So I tried to unveil these hidden spaces and make it somehow. It's a kind of sacral, space sacral, and to make it like profane, yeah, profane, yeah. So, I'd now like to move on to the related work, Invisible Oil. This work attempts to shine a spotlight on the North Sea oil industry in Aberdeen, Scotland. Not only does this work make visible the resource of oil itself, it also highlights our dependency on it. So this was in 2008. I was invited for residency to Aberdeen, and yeah, this is Aberdeen is it's called the oil capital of Europe, but now they switched it to energy capital because of, I think, global warming, and also the oil industry there is declining, like because the peak oil is they reached the peak oil, and all the platforms are old and are not that safe anymore. In 2008, Peacock Visual Arts Gallery in Aberdeen invited me to spend several months in town. Aberdeen is situated in northwestern Scotland and is known as the oil capital of Europe. My approach at the outset of any project is to do my research on location in order to get an immediate impression of a city, its industry, and the larger economy it is part of. I absorb this information and these experiences before going on to process and condense them into artistic works in various media as photography, video, audio, sculpture, print. The initial approach, as in my first such work, Non-Public Spaces, was to obtain access to the highly restricted location connected to the North Sea oil industry. So I began reaching out to the oil companies active there in the hopes of securing access to their land-based facilities as well as a drilling rig out in the North Sea. I contacted roughly 60 companies, and putting it mildly, extracting photography permits proved extremely difficult. I had a moderate success, and I visited a handful of these spaces. But the majority of the companies, especially the larger ones, refused me outright. Apart from the most important sites of the North Sea oil industry, I shifted my focus on the substance of oil itself, using it as a medium to develop various works, prints, photographs, sculptures that reflect upon our civilization's dependence on the resource of oil. I'd like now to show the individual works that I created over the course of this project. So some images. This is the harbor of Aberdeen. This is is very well known because before they produced granite, they have a huge granite, how to say, yeah. So the city is quite, somehow sometimes it's like living in a black and white movie, like just you see it's gray, the sky is gray, just the number plates are, yeah. So, and this is Tilidrone. I lived in this area in the suburb, so this was a very hard experience about the social conditions of a lot of people in Aberdeen who don't get profit of this industry, of the oil industry. So the rig sculptures. These, so this is a beach close to Aberdeen. These oil platforms were made from washed up pieces of plastic that I found on the beaches in and around Aberdeen. They were temporary sculptures that I made on location and photographed with the water in the background. These sculptures were named after economically disadvantaged neighborhoods in Aberdeen, in contrast to the oil companies active in the region, which tend to employ Scottish birds or geological formations to distinguish the oil fields and platforms. The North Sea benchmark Brent oil, for instance, derive its name from this little seabird, the Brent goose. In creating these sculptures, my interest in environmental questions fused with issues of social justice and the poor living conditions of many of Aberdeen's residents. So here, this is, I created 5 sculptures. This is Tilidrone, so this is the name Tilidrone where I live. There are 5 of these social disadvantaged neighborhoods. Northfield, Logie, forgot, and Tory. This is my next work, this drum. So with the title 158.98729 liters. I'm going to quote Tim Broderstone, who is a historian who is teaching at University of Aberdeen, and he did several surveys about the North Sea oil industry, and he set up an archive of oral history about the oil workers in this region. So I quote, the product serves its purpose largely unseen, finding its way into internal combustion engines or the energy market more generally, with little perceived connections to its origins or the process that developed it. Nor has cultural production been such as to draw public consciousness towards the industry, its way of working and its broader significance. So this quotation is from around 2000, so this isn't so, now I think changed a lot, so a lot of scientists and artists working with this subject matter. This sculptural work is a standard oil drum that I had copied in plexiglass. The steel pedestal that supports it integrates the shape of the St. Andrew's cross. Oh, just a second. This integrates the shape of the St. Andrew's cross, the Scottish flag. This oil drum contains one barrel, that's about 159 liters of crude oil. The drum's cap is removed, so the entire exhibition space is flooded with the smell of crude oil. The point being to make a normal invisible resource visible both to the eyes as well as to the other senses. It's important to note that the crude oil made available to me is from Venezuela, since not a single oil company working in the North Sea was willing to provide a barrel to me. So, fortunately, I got the crude oil from a refinery south of Aberdeen in Dundee, and this refinery is owned by by Venezuelan company. So the director, he supported me and with the crude oil. Otherwise, there was no chance to get it. Yeah. So the next work, the title is Derivatives 1 to 12. So there are 12 paper sheets. In this work, I applied several layers of crude oil to paper and pressed some of the washed up pieces of plastic directly onto it, like stamps. This work is a symbolic experiment. It's an attempt of sorts to take these oil-derived, industrial-produced petrochemical objects back to their origins as fossils. If you have any questions or if something is unclear, please stop me and I. So the next work is a three-part photographic work, simulation room, laboratory, wellhead. This three-part photo series in oil-smeared frames depicts two oil industry locations, a simulation room and a laboratory, and also includes a conceptual photograph, the portrait of a man with a drilling rig on his head. As I delved more deeply into the technical processes of oil extractions, an interesting analogy occurred to me involving the whalehead and the human psyche. The whalehead is the interface between the oil reservoir and the oil platform. In other words, it's where a mixture of crude oil, gas and water comes to the surface under very high pressure. And it's also the most sensitive and dangerous part of any drilling platform. So you remember Deepwater Horizon? It was the wellhead, and it's called the blow-up preventer. It's the device which comes after the wellhead, and yeah, this didn't work. Yeah, the blow-up preventer. So I continue. and it's also the most sensitive and dangerous part of any drilling platform. The two other photographs show real location of the North Sea oil industry. On the one hand, the simulation room. The hidden oil reservoir is simulated. So I show, this is the hidden reservoir is simulated and visualized. In the lab, on the other, the initial oil samples taken from the as yet untapped reservoir are analyzed in order to predict how the substances below will behave when accessed. This photographic work points to our unconscious minds and the hidden contents of the reservoir brought to the surface by the act of penetration, the drilling. An obvious analogy in the case of the human psyche suggests itself a therapeutic process by which the things that we collectively suppress can be translated into conscious, rational understanding and action. The next work, title is Reflecting Oil. This work, the first of my Reflecting Oil series, consists of a mirror built as a large framed plexiglass box equipped with a pump that sends crude oil pulsing through it. In this mirror, the flowing oil we simultaneously encounter ourselves and our culture. Reflecting oil reminds us that our society is founded upon oil's flow. Millions of barrels are pumped daily through pipelines or transported in other ways. A flow that makes our contemporary way of living possible. And the products we make end up, in turn, shaping us because they determine our daily habits in ways that we seldom directly perceive.
So you're looking at the reflection that's made on oil
that's moving, yeah. So it's, yeah. So I have published a book on visible oil in 2011, which documents the whole project. So I will switch to the work I did in Canada about the tar sand industry. Title is Oil and Water. In this work I'm dealing with the ongoing oil production taking place in northern Alberta, more especially the environmental impact of this industry upon the resource of water and the surrounding landscapes and ecosystems water feeds. I developed two art pieces which are based on lengthy research in fall 2015 and summer 2016. And unlike with the works I just discussed, their methodology is not of great significance. They emerge from my experience traveling to important oil sands industry sites around the Athabasca River, which engage both conceptually as well as experimentally the relationship between oil and water. I will now discuss the two works of mine that I exhibited in two different locations, or in two different exhibitions, one in Vienna at the end of 2015, and then in Saskatoon last November at Based Arts Gallery. So this is the first one. I think, is this out of focus? So it's better. This experimental work is made up of a steel tub that contains a mixture of water, bitumen, crude oil, and a number of photographs. The photographs are part of a documentary exploration of the social and ecological problems of the tar sand industry. Projected on the steel tank is a video image of a documentary of the oil sands discovery tour. The video shows a drive through the Suncor energy upgrader and is accompanied by the voice of an oil sands discovery center tour guide. The projected video image is framed by the materials and isn't recognizable to the audience. An important element of this project is my confrontation with the substances of bitumen and crude oil and their difficult properties. The water, bitumen, and crude oil mix slowly. They derogated the photographs and led to a strong aesthetic transformation. This intensive corrosive process doesn't just become visible for the viewer, but also sensible to the nose. The point is to stage a kind of allegory. The effects of oil extractions on nature and human life are rendered through a process of transformation that is both chemical and aesthetic. This piece was shown in the exhibition Tar Sands at Bildraum Gallery Vienna in December 2015. So this was a very experimental work, and I'm very interested in this confrontation with these difficult properties of this substance. So this is the second work. Title is Oil and Water Tanks. The second work is also an installation work and consists of 6 water tanks placed in front of a 3-channel video projection. So in the course of my confrontation with the substance of bitumen, I also printed images with the material bitumen and glass. The technique employed is screen printing in what turned out to be rather intensive and a difficult process. So here you see the bitumen screen print on glass sheets. So these are different, like I would say, key locations of this industry. So a mining site, the Athabasca River. So also, this is say a former forest. Yeah? So it's it looks like a desert. This is Syncrude, close to the Syncrude upgrader. A pipeline, a tailing pond. So behind this fence, these tailing ponds, they store the production water, and it's not accessible. And you see behind the fence there is scarce to keep away the birds, and the sound is very strange. There are a lot of sound cannons, and they use it to keep the birds away. Otherwise, if they would enter this area, they would die. So it's very strange experience. And this is a reclaimed land, like of Sankor. So it's, like I would say, kind of a PR site. Yeah? So I did this tour, this oil discovery tour, and at the end of the tour, you end up here, and they try to explain that they taking care about the landscape after mining. So this is a exhibition view of the show at Paved Arts last year at Paved Arts. I just returned to the screen prints. I then fashioned water tanks featuring various images of the oil industry locations in northern Alberta out of the screen-printed glass sheets. The transparent containers are filled with water samples from various points of the Athabasca River and placed on wooden plinths in front of a triptych of videos. The bitumen image layer on the glass is facing the inside of the tank and brings the two substances conceptually together. Also, I have to mention, I spoke with Marcus about that a bitumen, the first photograph, was made with bitumen in 1826. Nebs is the name of the inventor of the photography, and so it's interesting that he used bitumen of Judea and put it on a copper plate, or what the tin is a butane, yeah, plate. So the first photo was taken with bitumen. So that's interesting. So Marcus, I spoke with Marcus about this, and I was aware that the first photo was taken with bitumen, but it also is another way of reading this work. I'm sure there is the Canadian artist Warren Carb, with his Warren Carbu. He works with, the name is Petrography, and he uses also bitumen, but he is exposing the light, with an enlarger. He put the photographic light. And the original process would be to use this photographic plate and to take a real photo, for example, with an 8 by 10 inch camera. What I would like to do, but I don't know how long the exposure time would be. I don't know, several days. So the videos depict 3 different aspects of the water-intensive industrial landscape, with the central video featuring the world's third largest watershed, the river that runs through it, the mighty Athabasca. On the center screen On the center screen, we are on a tranquil canoe trip on the trip up the Athabasca River. One that is suddenly disrupted by a giant upgrader of the Suncor Oil Company. Flanking this document are intermittent images of massive tailing ponds on the left, and on the right a video taken of a healing gathering of Fort McMurray First Nation during the group's visit to Suncor tailing pond. So I show you, I think the first, sorry. All three videos feature bodies of water turning the Jamat from the central source of fresh water required for extracting and refining bituminous earth and its eventual slurry waste collected in the poisonous tailings. This installation was exhibited in the show Tar Sands Approaching an Anthropocentric Site at Paved Galleries. So I will present a work I showed images of the first oil and water work on this billboard with dots. So here, this is a work. I have to say, last year I presented my work here as well, and this work I didn't present. So it's also related to this environmental subject, but also to my home province, Carinthia. The title is of this work in public space is Carinthian Horizon. 2016, I was invited to participate in an exhibition in my native city, Klagenfurt. Klagenfurt is the capital of Carinthia. I was commissioned to produce a work in public space for a former harbor, the Landhafen. I decided to realize a platform sculpture like those I had constructed in Aberdeen on a much larger scale. The result was a 10-meter high rig, Carinthian Horizon, which I contextualized in new ways. On the one hand, the sculpture referenced the ecological catastrophe that took place in 2010 in the Gulf of Mexico, and on the other hand, the financial fiasco of the federal province of Carinthia, which was nearing bankruptcy due to the corruption of the former right-wing governor Jörg Haider, and had to be saved by the Austrian state. So this is I tried to combine this economical disaster which happened by the former governor of Carinthia. So you see here at the derrick, or you see this is you see these hands, and I quote a monument which, because the governor he died, Jörg Haider died in a car accident in 2010, I think, or 11, and somebody created